Hello viewers, this is my new video. In this video, I'm going to talk about the three most common causes of vertigo, which are BPPV, Meniere's disease, and acoustic neuroma. There are actually five most common inner ear problems causing vertigo. These are BPPV, Meniere's disease, acoustic neuroma, labyrinthitis, and vestibular neuronitis or vestibular neuritis. I have posted another video about vestibular neuritis and labyrinthitis. You can watch that video if you are interested to learn more about these inner ear problems. Let's start our today's presentation. Apart from these inner ear problems, there are some other causes as well which can cause vertigo and dizziness. Most common are postural hypotension, medication-induced vertigo, transient ischemic attack or stroke, migraines, multiple sclerosis, trauma, and tumor of the brain. So let's start our actual presentation. So our today's topics are BPPV, Meniere's disease, and acoustic neuroma. Before going into details of these conditions, it is better to have a review of the structure of the ear. As you know, ear has three parts: outer, middle, and inner. And the inner ear, it contains a system of fluid filled tubes known as the labyrinth. Labyrinth has two parts: cochlea, which senses sound, and vestibular system, which senses movement of our head and helps with maintaining our balance. This vestibular system consists of the vestibule and the semicircular canals. You can see in this diagram that there is cochlea on our right, and on our left there are three thin tube like structures which are the semicircular canals. And there are two nerves. One is cochlear nerve, which is also known as auditory nerve, related to hearing, and the other one is connected to these semicircular canals, and this is called vestibular nerve. And these two nerves then combine to form the vestibulocochlear nerve, which is called eighth cranial nerve, and these take signals to our brain. In these semicircular canals and cochlea, there is fluid And this fluid is of two types. One is called endolymph and the other one is perilymph. And these two fluids are separated by a membrane, and these fluids, they keep circulating in this in the labyrinth. Let's start our first topic, which is BPPV. BPPV stands for benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. As we discussed, it is a condition of the inner ear. Benign because underlying cause is not serious. Paroxysmal means recurring episodes, and positional means triggered by certain positions of the head. And vertigo is the sensation that you or your surroundings are spinning. So BPPV causes short episodes of intense dizziness or vertigo on movements of the head in certain directions. And it especially affects older people. The problem in BPPV is that when a broken off tiny fragment called autoconia, which is actually made up of calcium carbonate, and calcium carbonate forms crystals, which are normally in vestibule. When these broken of tiny fragment or fragments, they get into one of the semicircular canals, then these cause problem. If these fragments, they remain in or go back to the vestibule part, then they don't cause problem. Only when this broken off segment comes into a semicircular canal, most commonly posterior semicircular canal, then it causes symptoms of the condition, including vertigo and nausea. In this picture you can see that this cochlea and semicircular canals are connected through a part which is vestibule, and broken up fragments from this vestibule, they often collect at the bottom of the posterior semicircular canal. And when Apley maneuver is performed, the aim is to use the force of gravity to move these debris back into the vestibule. Symptoms of BPPV are: the most common symptom is vertigo, which typically lasts just for 20 to 30 seconds, usually less than 1 minute. and this disappears completely by keeping the head still. It's usually triggered by a change in head position. The two most common movements are getting out of bed or rolling over in bed. Sometimes this vertigo is triggered just by looking up. Second symptom is nausea, which may last for an hour. Vomiting is not common in BPPV, and in most cases, the symptoms clear away within several weeks or months, even without treatment. For diagnosis, characteristic symptoms are more than enough without any further tests. Relevant examination which can be done are ear examination including otoscopy to see for any signs of inflammation or infection in the outer or middle ear, and then eye examination, tests for balance, and hearing tests. These are to differentiate from other conditions. The, to confirm the diagnosis of BPPV, Dix-Hallpike's test is done. This is positive if moving the patient's head into certain positions triggers dizziness or vertigo and nystagmus. Treatment options are no treatment or the Apley maneuver, then Brand-Daroff exercises, and the last option is surgery. BPPV usually goes away on its own after several weeks or months without any treatment. On average, it may take 10 weeks. It is thought that broken off segments or otoconia they dissolve or move back to the vestibule where they settle down and they cause no symptoms. Second option is Apley maneuver. This maneuver often works best if patient has fragments of debris at the bottom of the posterior semicircular canal. This is the most common site where broken off segments from the vestibule can go and settle in the posterior semicircular canal. Apley maneuver is done by a series of 4 movements of the head, and after each movement the head is held in the same place for 30 seconds or so, and these movements cause the posterior semicircular canal to rotate around in such a way that gravity moves the otoconia fragments out from the bottom of the posterior canal into the vestibule where they cause no symptoms and patient is cured. It is successful in about 8 out of 10 cases with just one treatment. But if the first treatment does not work, this can be repeated after a week or so. It can be easily done in doctor's surgery in a few minutes and can dramatically cure a patient of symptoms. In case of recurrence, the maneuver can be repeated. Brand Daroff exercises. If Apple maneuver does not work, then these exercises can be advised. In Brand Daroff exercises, head is moved in a different way as compared to in Apple maneuver. And last option is surgery. In extremely rare cases, if symptoms persist for months or years and cannot be eased, then an operation is performed to take out the function of the posterior semicircular canal. There are some safety measures to avoid falls around the home. Patients should be advised to get out of bed slowly and avoid doing tasks that involve looking upwards. And you should stop driving if you have sudden, unexpected, and disabling attacks of dizziness. And advise the patient that they should inform their employer if BPPV could pose a risk to themselves or others during their job, such as if a patient uses ladders or works on heights or operates heavy machineries or is a driver. Now coming to our next topic, which is Meniere's disease. There are several disorders in which it is generally thought that pressure anomalies within the ear contribute to ear symptoms, and Meniere's disease is one of them. It is also an inner ear condition that causes sudden recurrent attacks of vertigo and some other related symptoms. Meniere's disease usually starts in one ear, but later on it can spread to both ears and most commonly affects people between 20 to 60 years of age. It's not common in children, and if it is not treated, it can lead to permanent hearing loss. What causes Meniere's disease? It is thought to be a result of an abnormal amount of fluid in the inner ear. As I discussed earlier, there are two types of fluids inside the inner ear. One is endolymph and the other one is perilymph. And when this endolymph is increased in the inner ear, then it causes pressure and causes symptoms of Meniere's disease. What is the exact cause? It is not known, but There are some possible factors which can contribute to this rise of pressure inside the inner ear. For example, improper fluid drainage, perhaps because of a blockage or anatomical malformation or abnormality. Other factors can be abnormal immune response and as a result of viral infection. And Meniere's disease has some genetic predisposition as well. It runs in families and maybe a combination of above factors can lead to the symptoms of Meniere's disease. Symptoms of Meniere's disease are recurring episodes of vertigo which typically occurs without any warning and usually lasts for 20 minutes to several hours, but for less than 24 hours. Attacks can occur in clusters and can occur several times a week, or they may be separated by weeks, months, or years. Associated with nausea or vomiting. There is feeling of unsteadiness and imbalance. There is fluctuating hearing loss for low frequency sounds. This is fluctuating because amount of fluid when increases there is more hearing loss, and when it reduces then there is less hearing loss, so it fluctuates. Then tinnitus is also a typical symptom of Meniere's disease. It means a ringing, a roaring, whistling, hissing sound inside the ear. And because of increased pressure inside the inner ear, there is also a feeling of fullness, which is known as aural fullness. Diagnosis is based on typical history, and there is a diagnostic criteria for Meniere's disease diagnosis, which is 2 episodes of vertigo, each lasting 20 minutes or longer, but not more than 12 hours. Hearing loss should be present, verified by a hearing test. And tinnitus or a feeling of fullness in your ear. And exclusion of other known causes of these problems. So this is the diagnostic criteria of Meniere's disease along with typical history. Relevant examinations, ear examination including otoscopy, eye examinations, and tests for balance and hearing, and tests to rule out other conditions. For example, blood tests and imaging scans, MRI or CT scan. These scans are performed to exclude Other disorders such as tumor in the brain or multiple sclerosis. In some patients, hearing assessment may also be recommended. These people have problems hearing low frequency or combined high and low frequency sounds, and their hearing is normal for mid-range frequencies. Audiometry is done for assessment how well the patient detects sounds at different pitches and volumes, and how well the patient distinguishes between similar sounding words. For balance assessment, actually in most cases between episodes of vertigo, sense of balance returns to normal in case of Meniere's disease. But if a patient has some ongoing balance problems, special tests to assess function of the inner ear are recommended. There are various special tests like video nystagmography, rotatory chair testing, vestibular evoked myogenic potential testing, post-urography, video head impulse test, and electrocochleography. For these tests, patients are referred to special department. Treatment of Meniere's disease. There is no cure for Meniere's disease. There are some treatment options which include self-help measures, medical treatment to control symptoms, and some other treatments which I will discuss. Self-help measures are that at first sign of attack, patient should take vertigo medicine if they have some. They should sit or lie down with eyes closed or keep their eyes fixed on an object in front. And they should not turn the head quickly. If they need to move their head, they should do it slowly and carefully. And once the attack is over, they should try to move around to help eyesight and other senses to compensate for the problems of the confusing signals coming from the inner ear. This will help to recover more quickly. Medical treatment options are using medicines to control symptoms of vertigo, nausea, and vomiting. We can use prochlorperazine or antihistamines, and patients should also be given a supply to keep at home as discussed in previous slide, and these patients shouldn't drive, cycle, or operate machinery while taking these medicines even if vertigo seems better. This is for their own safety. And to reduce fluid retention or fluid pressure in the inner ear, diuretics may be prescribed and salt intake restriction. Other treatments which I mentioned earlier are middle ear injections. These are used in resistant cases and these may improve vertigo symptoms. Options include gentamicin injection, which is an ototoxic antibiotic, with this antibiotic there is a risk of further hearing loss. In some cases, steroids such as dexamethasone can be given an injection into the middle ear. It is slightly less effective than gentamicin but less likely to cause further hearing loss. These medicines are then absorbed into the inner ear and may improve vertigo symptoms. There are some surgical treatment which can be recommended if severe and debilitating vertigo attacks which are not getting better with other treatment options. Then surgery might be an option, and procedures include endolymphatic sac decompression or removal of the labyrinth, that is labyrinthectomy, and in some cases vestibular nerve is sectioned. These patients may also need treatment for tinnitus and hearing loss. For hearing loss, a hearing aid can be advised and it may improve hearing. And for balance problems, vestibular rehabilitation therapy can be advised. These patients may also need psychological advice and support because distress is very common as a complication of Meniere's disease, because this condition is difficult to cope and is very unpredictable, and these patients may need counseling including cognitive behavioral therapy and relaxation therapy like breathing exercises and yoga. Vestibular rehabilitation therapy is recommended for persistent dizziness and unsteadiness which is not getting better after many weeks and months, and for this referral is made to a physiotherapist. Specially designed exercises are performed for brain training to use the signals from eyes, joints and muscles to compensate for the confusing input coming from the affected ear. VRT helps with balance, walking and makes everyday activities easier for the patient. In the beginning, the patient may feel more unsteady, but improvement is seen over time. Complications of Meniere's disease is that some people continue to feel unsteady even after the initial spinning and dizziness have gone away. This can last a long time, weeks or even months. The patient is more likely to fall over. And sometimes Meniere's disease can cause permanent hearing loss if not treated. And in some patients, persistent tinnitus can also be a problem. Precautions are that patients should not drive or operate machinery while having symptoms or during taking medicines for dizziness because they can cause drowsiness. If symptoms get worse while at home or new symptoms develop, then patients should contact their GPs. And last topic for today is acoustic neuromas. This is another inner ear condition which causes vertigo and hearing problems. Acoustic neuromas are also called vestibular schwannomas. These are benign brain tumors which arise from the Schwann cells, which are which cover the vestibulocochlear nerve. And vestibular cochlear nerve, as you know, is responsible for our balance and hearing, and it has a lining which is covered by Schwann cells, and these tumors arise from these Schwann cells. These are non-cancerous and they cannot metastasize to other parts of the brain. The only thing is that they grow, they are slow growing tumors, and when they grow and become bigger in size, then they cause symptoms because of their pressure effects. If they grow large enough because of their size, they can put pressure on nearby nerves, for example, facial nerve or trigeminal nerve, or sometimes they can become so much bigger that they can compromise important functions of the brain. As we discussed earlier, the vestibulocochlear nerve has two parts, vestibular and cochlear parts. So here in this diagram you can see that this yellow structure is vestibular. The yellow structures are nerves, and and this and a facial nerve is in close proximity to vestibulocochlear nerves, and on these uh, on these yellow structures you can see growth of acoustic neuroma, and when it becomes bigger it can compress the facial nerve which is passing alongside this vestibulocochlear nerve. What is the cause of acoustic neuroma? The cause is a malfunctioning gene. There is a tumor suppressor gene on chromosome 22 that helps control the growth of Schwann cells. When this gene is defected, then growth of Schwann cells is uncontrolled, which gives rises to these benign tumors. But why this happens? There is no identifiable cause in most cases. A risk factor is having a parent with neurofibromatosis type 2. Faulty gene on chromosome 22 is inherited in this autosomal dominant condition. In neurofibromatosis type 2 there are bilateral vestibular schwannomas plus benign tumors on other nerves. But remember that neurofibromatosis type 2 only accounts for about 5% of acoustic neuroma cases. In 95% cases, it is not associated with neurofibromatosis type 2. Symptoms of acoustic neuroma, these are slowly growing tumors, so initial symptoms are subtle and gradual and include hearing loss in the affected ear, tinnitus, dizziness, and problems with balance. These develop over many years because, as I mentioned, tumor is very slow growing. When it becomes bigger because of pressure effects, if it presses on nearby nerves affecting the face, then it can cause numbness, tingling, or weakness on one side of the face, difficulty in swallowing, and hoarseness. If causes increased pressure on the brain, then it can cause headaches and changes to eyesight such as blurry vision or diplopia, and rarely it may grow large enough to compress brain structures, for example the brainstem, and can become life-threatening. Early diagnosis is important to keep the tumor from growing large enough to cause serious consequences, such as total hearing loss or a life-threatening hydrocephalus. So detailed history, otoscopy, hearing tests for balance, eye examination, neurological examination of face, arms and legs, and an MRI scan to find out the exact position and size of the tumor. All these help in making the final diagnosis. If MRI scan is not available, then a CT scan can be performed, but MRI scan is the diagnostic modality of choice. Treatment of acoustic neuroma depends on the size of the tumor and how much symptoms are impacting and patient's general health. When the tumor is small and it is causing mild symptoms, then active monitoring by regular scans just to keep an eye on the growth. But if it becomes large enough when treatment is needed, then radiotherapy or surgery are the options. All of the tumor or a part of the tumor is removed. Sometimes partial removal is preferred to avoid damage to the nearby nerves. And in some cases, surgery is followed by radiotherapy. There are some side effects of surgery, for example, permanent hearing loss in the affected ear, and patient may need a hearing aid. And then, as mentioned earlier, facial nerve damage can lead to facial palsy. Usually, this is temporary. Patient may need treatments for hearing loss because it is difficult for people with sensory neural hearing loss to regain hearing completely. So they may find it very helpful to have hearing aids, or maybe benefited from cochlear implants. It is very important that if patient has severe and sudden and disabling dizziness, then they must inform the DVLA, and they should also ask their doctor about other symptoms, whether they will affect their driving and whether they need to tell the DVLA or not. And then DVLA will tell you when you are allowed to start driving again. DVLA may ask you if they can get medical information about you from your doctor. So this is the end of our today's three important topics, and don't forget to watch part 2 of this vertigo series, in which I discussed labyrinthitis and vestibular neuritis. You can watch these on YouTube. And thank you very much for watching this video, and please subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon for more interesting videos. Thank you very much.